The massive space station called Harmony Prime floated in the darkness between stars. Captain Do-hyun Kim looked out the window of the human shuttle as they got closer. The station was huge, bigger than any city on Earth. Lights sparkled across, its surface like stars. "First time meeting aliens," said Minji Park, checking her sidearm one more time. She was the weapons expert for their team. "Think they'll be friendly?" "We'll find out soon enough," replied Ji-ho Lee, the tactical analyst. He was reading reports on his tablet about the different alien species they would meet today. Captain Do-hyun straightened his uniform. Today was important. After years of space travel, humans had finally been invited to meet the Galactic Council. Earth's leaders had chosen their best people for this moment. They wanted to make a good impression. The shuttle docked with a soft bump. The airlock opened with a hiss. Captain Do-hyun stepped through first, followed by his team. The corridor was massive, built for creatures much larger than humans. The walls glowed with soft blue light. "Welcome, humans," said a voice that sounded like grinding rocks. Captain Do-hyun looked up to see Ambassador Thextar of the Vorthak Empire. The alien was 3 meters tall and covered in crystal-like armor that grew from its skin. Its eyes glowed red behind the crystal faceplate. "Thank you for having us," Captain Do-hyun replied with a small bow. Behind Thextar floated Zifara of the Nixari Collective. This alien had no solid form. It looked like a cloud of energy that changed colors as it moved. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in their minds. "So these are the new species." Zifara's thoughts felt cold. "The ones who still use metal, projectiles." The meeting room was enormous. The ceiling stretched so high that Captain Do-hyun couldn't see it in the dim light. Dozens of alien species sat around a circular table. Some looked like giant insects. Others were made of what seemed like living rock. A few appeared to be floating jellyfish with multiple eyes. "Please, sit," Thextar said, pointing to small chairs that had been added for the humans. The chairs looked tiny next to the massive seats used by the aliens. Captain Do-hyun sat down, feeling very small. Minji and Ji-ho took seats beside him. All around them, alien eyes watched with curiosity. "We understand you wish to join our galactic community," said Council Leader Morthek, a creature that looked like a walking tree with too many arms. "But first, we must understand your capabilities." "Of course," Captain Do-hyun replied. "We're prepared to share information about human technology and culture." "Excellent," Thextar said, making a sound like breaking glass. "Let us begin with your military capabilities. Show us your weapons." Minji stood up and placed her sidearm on the table. The pistol looked even smaller next to the massive alien artifacts already displayed. Next, she set down her plasma rifle. The weapon was sleek and black, but simple compared to the glowing, floating devices the aliens had brought. Thextar leaned forward to examine the weapons. His crystal faceplate reflected the room's light as he picked up the pistol. The weapon looked like a toy in his massive hands. "This fires metal pellets?" Thextar asked. The sound he made could only be described as laughter. How wonderfully primitive. Other aliens around the table began making their own species versions of laughter. Clicking sounds, musical tones, and flashing lights filled the room. And this plasma rifle. Zifara's mental voice dripped with amusement. "It uses magnetic containment for superheated gas. How quaint. We developed such technology 10,000 years ago." "Tell us," Thextar said, still holding the pistol. "Do you still use chemical explosives to propel these metal bits?" "We call it gunpowder," Minji replied, her voice steady despite the mockery. "And yes, some of our weapons still use it." The laughter grew louder. Captain Do-hyun felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression calm. This was diplomacy. Getting angry would not help Earth. "Perhaps you should see real weapons," Thextar said. He activated a device on his armor. A hologram appeared above the table, showing a massive ship-mounted weapon. "This is a molecular disruptor. It breaks the bonds between atoms. Your target simply stops existing." "Impressive," Captain Do-hyun said. Zifara created her own display. The hologram showed a weapon that looked like a miniature star. Plasma, cannons that harness the power of stellar cores. The temperature reaches millions of degrees. Matter becomes energy. Very advanced, Jiho commented, taking notes on his tablet. And you fight with metal pellets, said another alien, one that looked like a giant centipede. How do you expect such simple weapons to work against real military technology? They've served us well so far, Minji replied. Against what enemies? Thextar asked. Other humans with equally primitive weapons? We've had our conflicts, Captain, Dohyun said carefully. I'm sure you have. Zifara's mental voice was filled with condescension. But now you enter a galaxy filled with species that command the fundamental forces of the universe. Your little guns are museum pieces. Council leader Morthek raised one of his many arms. Perhaps we should discuss humanity's place in our community. Yes, Thextar agreed. We propose protected status for your species. You would be classified as a developing civilization under our care. What would that mean? Captain Dohyun asked. You would focus on what you do best, Zifara explained. Agriculture, perhaps, entertainment, simple manufacturing. Leave military matters to species with appropriate technology. We could assign you a small sector on the Galactic Rim, Morthek added. Safe space where you can grow without interfering with serious military operations. Captain Dohyun looked at his team. Minji's knuckles were white as she gripped her chair. Jiho was still taking notes, but his expression was dark. That's very generous, Captain Dohyun said slowly. But humanity prefers to handle its own defense. With what? Thextar asked, picking up the plasma rifle. This toy? My personal sidearm has more power than your largest weapon. We appreciate the offer, Captain Dohyun replied. But we'll need time to discuss this with Earth's government. Of course, Morthek said. Take all the time you need. The offer will remain open. The meeting continued for several more hours. The aliens showed off more of their advanced technology. Weapons that bent space and time. Shields that existed in multiple dimensions. Ships that could destroy planets with a single shot. Through it all, the aliens continued to make jokes about human weapons. They passed around Minji's pistol like it was a curiosity from a museum. Some aliens took pictures with their various recording devices, as if the human weapons were amusing souvenirs. Finally, the meeting ended. The humans were escorted back to their shuttle. As they walked through the corridors, Captain Dohyun could hear alien voices behind them, still laughing. Gunpowder, one said. Can you believe it? Metal pellets, said another. How do they expect to fight wars with such things? Once they were back on their shuttle and heading toward Earth, Minji finally spoke. Captain, did you see how they looked? At our weapons? I saw, Captain Dohyun replied. They think we're harmless, Jiho added. They're treating us like children with toy guns. Captain Dohyun stared out the window at the stars. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. Sir? Minji asked. Let them think what they want, Captain Dohyun said quietly. Sometimes it's better when your enemies underestimate you. The shuttle continued toward Earth, carrying news of humanity's first contact with the galaxy. Behind them, Harmony Prime grew smaller in the darkness. The aliens there continued their discussions, confident that they understood exactly what humanity was capable of. They would learn soon enough how wrong they were. 3 months had passed since the meeting at Harmony Prime. Earth's leaders were still discussing the aliens' offer of protected status when the warning signals came in. Commander Yoonji Choi was drinking coffee in her office on New Busan Colony when her communication system started screaming. Red lights flashed across every screen. The colony's defense network had detected massive ships approaching from deep space. How many? She asked her aide, Lieutenant Byung-ho Shin. 15 large vessels, Commander. They're huge. Much bigger than anything we've ever built. Yoonji set down her coffee and walked to the main command center. The colony had been built in the asteroids around the star system's edge. It was supposed to be safe out here, far from the main space lanes where pirates might attack. Show me, she ordered. The main screen lit up with a tactical display. 15 massive ships were approaching in formation. Each one was the size of a small city. They moved slowly but with obvious purpose toward New Busan. Are they responding to communication attempts? Yunji asked. No, Commander, we've tried all standard frequencies. They're not answering. What about their technology? Can we identify it? Lieutenant Byung-ho checked his screens. The hull composition matches Vorthak Empire ships. Same crystal-based armor we saw in the intelligence reports from Harmony Prime. Yunji nodded grimly. The Vorthak were one of the alien species that had laughed at human weapons during the first contact meeting. They had molecular disruptor weapons that could supposedly break apart matter at the atomic level. Commander, called Communications Officer Hyun Yu from across the room. Incoming transmission from the lead ship. Put it through. The screen changed to show War Marshal Krelvex of the Vorthak Empire. He was even larger than Ambassador Thextar had been. His crystal armor was darker with spikes growing from his shoulders and arms. Battle scars crossed his faceplate. Human colony. His voice rumbled like an avalanche. I am War Marshal Krelvex. You will surrender immediately. This is Commander Yunji Choi of New Busan. You are in human space without permission. State your purpose. Krelvex made that grinding sound that passed for Vorthak laughter. Your space? Little human, this sector has been claimed by the Vorthak Empire. You are trespassing. Our colony has been here for 5 years. We have legal settlement rights. Legal rights? Krelvex's red eyes flared brighter. The only law here is strength, and you have shown that humans are weak. What do you want? Yunja asked, though she already suspected the answer. Surrender. Your people will become workers for the Empire. Your colony will serve our expansion into this region. Submit now, and we will grant you quick conquest. Yunja looked around the command center. Her officers were watching, waiting for her decision. New Busan had 50,000 colonists, families, children, people who had come here to build new lives among the stars. And if we refuse, then we will demonstrate why your primitive weapons are useless against real military power. Krelvex gestured, and the screen showed one of his ships. Massive weapons covered its hull. Molecular disruptors, human. They will turn your ships into empty space. Your metal bullets cannot even scratch our crystal armor. Yunja was quiet for a long moment. She thought about the meeting at Harmony Prime, how the aliens had laughed at human weapons, how they had called humanity primitive and weak. War Marshal Krelvex, she said finally. Yes? Come and take it. Krelvex's eyes blazed with anger. So be it. You will learn the price of defying the Vorthak Empire. The transmission ended. Alarms continued to sound throughout the command center. All ships to battle stations, Yunja ordered. Launch all fighters. Activate the orbital defense platforms. Commander, Lieutenant Byung-ho said quietly. Our entire fleet is only 12 ships. They have 15, and each one is much larger than our biggest destroyer. Then we'll have to be smarter, Yunja replied. Not bigger. The New Busan defense fleet was typical of human military design. Simple, practical ships built for reliability rather than show. 3 destroyers with missile arrays, 5 frigates mounting railguns, 4 light cruisers with mixed weapon systems. No fancy energy shields or exotic physics, just solid engineering and good tactics. Fleet reports ready for combat, called Tactical Officer Sulgyo. Fighter squadrons launching, added Flight Control Officer Minseo Han. On the main screen, they watched the Vorthak ships approach. The alien vessels were works of art in their own way. Crystalline hulls that sparkled with inner light. Weapon ports that glowed with contained energy. They moved like living things, organic curves flowing through space. Range to target? Yunja asked. 200,000 kilometers in closing. Hold position. Let them come to us. The first Vorthak ship opened fire at maximum range. Beams of purple energy lanced through space toward the human fleet. The molecular disruptor beams were designed to break apart the bonds between atoms. Whatever they hit would simply cease to exist at the molecular level. Evasive maneuvers, Yunja ordered. The human ships scattered, their engines flaring bright blue. The disruptor beams missed, striking empty space where the fleet had been moments before. Return fire. All ships, target the lead vessel. The human response was different from what the Vorthak expected. No energy beams, no exotic particle weapons, just simple, straightforward kinetic projectiles. The destroyer Incheon opened fire first. Its railgun sent a tungsten slug downrange at 30 kilometers per second. The projectile was just a piece of metal, but it carried enormous kinetic energy. The slug hit the lead Vorthak ship dead center. Krelvex had been confident that his crystal armor could stop any human weapon. Crystal was harder than any metal, after all. Molecular disruptors couldn't affect it, but the railgun slug didn't try to break molecular bonds. It simply carried more kinetic energy than the crystal could absorb. The armor shattered like glass hit with a hammer. Direct hit, called tactical. Officer Selgi. Enemy armor is breached. Impossible, came Krelvex's voice over the communication channel. Your primitive weapons cannot. His words were cut off as more railgun slugs found their target. The frigate Busan fired next, followed by Seoul and Daegu. Each shot punched through the crystalline armor as if it were paper. All ships, continue. Firing, Yunja ordered. Concentrate on single targets. The Vorthak ships tried to return fire, but the human vessels were too fast and maneuverable. Years of fighting pirates and raiders had taught human captains how to avoid enemy weapons. The massive Vorthak ships had been built to fight other large vessels in line formations. They couldn't track the smaller, faster human ships. Enemy vessel, showing critical damage, reported Silgi. Hull breaches on multiple decks. On the screen they could see atmosphere venting from the lead Vorthak ship. The crystal armor that had been their pride was now a liability. Each railgun impact sent cracks spreading across the hull. The rigid structure that made the armor so strong also made it brittle. Incoming transmission from the enemy flagship, called Hayun. Put it through. Krelvex appeared on screen again. His bridge was filled with smoke and flashing lights. Crystal debris covered the floor behind him. This is impossible, he roared. Your weapons are primitive. They cannot penetrate our armor. Apparently they can, Yunja replied calmly. Would you like to surrender? Never. All ships close range and ram them. Our hulls are stronger than their tiny vessels. But the Vorthak charge never reached the human fleet. Fighter squadrons swarmed around the alien ships, firing missiles and autocannon rounds. Each fighter was tiny compared to the massive Vorthak vessels, but they were fast and carried enough firepower to exploit the cracks the railguns had made. Frigate Captain Wanbin Jiang targeted the second Vorthak ship with his ship's entire missile battery. 20 warheads streaked through space, each one guided by simple but effective targeting systems. The missiles didn't carry exotic warheads or strange energy fields. They just carried a lot of high explosives. The explosions rippled across the Vorthak ship's hull. Crystal armor that had been weakened by railgun impacts finally gave way completely. Secondary explosions began deep inside the alien vessel as its own weapon systems overloaded. Second enemy ship is dead in space, reported Sulgi. Third ship is turning away, added Minseo from flight control. On the main screen, the remaining Vorthak ships were indeed retreating. Their formation was broken. 3 ships had been destroyed or disabled by human weapons that they had dismissed as primitive toys. Shall we pursue? Asked Lieutenant Byungho. Yunja watched the alien ships flee toward the edge of the system. No, let them go. Let them tell their empire what happened here. Commander, called Hayun from communications. Incoming transmission from War Marshal Krelvex. Put it through. The Vorthak leader appeared on screen one last time. His armor was cracked and fluid leaked from wounds on his arms. Behind him, his bridge crew worked frantically to repair damaged systems. This is not over, human, he growled. The Empire will return with a real fleet. Your metal pellets will not save you then. Maybe, Yunja replied. But today they saved us just fine. The transmission ended. The Vorthak ships continued their retreat, leaving behind the wreckage of their lead vessels and their assumption that human weapons were harmless. Yunja turned to her bridge crew. Damage report? Minimal damage to our ships, Sulgi reported. A few minor hits from their energy weapons, but nothing serious. Casualties? None on our side. News of the new Busan victory spread through human space like wildfire. More importantly, it spread through alien communication networks even faster. Within days, every species in the galaxy had heard that the primitive humans had defeated a Vorthak battle fleet using simple kinetic weapons. Captain Do-Yun Kim stood on the bridge of the battleship Soul's Pride, watching the tactical displays. Update in real time. Admiral Sun Wuhan paced behind him, studying reports from across human territory. The Vorthak are mobilizing their entire third fleet, Admiral Sun Wu said. 200 ships, including their new super dreadnoughts. They're taking us seriously now, Captain Do-Hyun observed. Good, it's about time. The Soul's Pride was humanity's newest battleship, though it looked much like all other human vessels. Clean lines, practical design, no decorative elements. What the aliens couldn't see were the weapon systems hidden beneath the simple exterior. Sir, called Communications Officer Yoon-Ho Park. Incoming message from the captured Vorthak prisoners. 3 days earlier, human forces had rescued the crew of a damaged Vorthak cruiser. The aliens had been expecting torture or execution. Instead, they found themselves in clean medical facilities being treated by human doctors. Put them through, Admiral Sun Wu ordered. The screen showed Sub-Commander Vexthar, the highest-ranking Vorthak survivor. His crystal armor had been replaced with simple human clothing. Medical bandages covered his wounds. Admiral Han, Vexthar said, his voice confused. I do not understand your weapons. What don't you understand? Our armor should stop kinetic projectiles. Crystal is harder than any metal, yet your railgun slugs penetrated as if our hulls were made of air. Engineer Hyunwoo Nam stepped forward. He had been studying the captured Vorthak technology, trying to understand why the aliens had been so confident in their defenses. May I explain, Admiral? Go ahead, Engineer Nam. Hyunwoo turned to the Vorthak prisoner. Your armor is indeed very hard, but hardness and toughness are different things. Your crystal is hard but brittle. When our railgun slug hits at 30 kilometers per second, it doesn't matter how hard your armor is. The kinetic energy has to go somewhere. But molecular disruptors can unmake matter itself, Vexthar protested. How can simple kinetic energy be more powerful? Because, Hyunwoo said patiently, your molecular disruptors only work if they can interact with our ship's atoms. But kinetic energy doesn't care about molecular bonds. Kinetic energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. It's basic physics. Admiral Sun Wu gestured to the tactical display. Show him the real difference, Engineer Nam. Hyunwoo activated a hologram that showed a cross-section of a human railgun projectile. This isn't just a piece of metal, Sub-Commander. This is a tungsten penetrator with a depleted uranium core, wrapped in a smart material that adjusts its density during flight. Vexthar leaned forward, studying the display. But your intelligence report said you used simple metal bullets. We do, Captain Do-Hyun said with a slight smile. We just make our metals very, very dense and send them very, very fast. The real secret, added Dr. Soyeon Yu, joining the conversation, is that while you've been developing weapons that can be countered, we've been perfecting weapons that follow fundamental laws of physics. You can't argue with momentum, Doctor. Soyeon was humanity's chief weapons researcher. She had spent 20 years designing systems that looked simple but were devastatingly effective. Our missiles aren't just missiles, she continued. They're guided asteroids with fusion drives. Our lasers aren't just lasers. They're focused solar collectors that can channel the output of an entire star. Vexthar's eyes widened behind his damaged faceplate. You channel stellar energy? Among other things, Dr. Soyeon replied. We've learned that nature provides the most powerful weapons. We just figured out how to aim them. The briefing was interrupted by an urgent communication from the sensor station. Admiral, called sensor operator Chaewon Lee. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. It's the Nexari Collective. Admiral Sun Wu turned to the main display. 12 Nexari vessels had appeared at the edge of the system. Unlike the solid crystal ships of the Vorthak, the Nexari ships seemed to be made of pure energy contained in geometric force fields. Are they hostile? Captain Do-Hyun asked. Unknown, sir. They're not responding to communication attempts. Admiral, Han, came a mental voice that everyone on the bridge could hear. It was Ambassador Zifara from the first contact meeting. We have come to observe. Observe what? Admiral Sunwoo replied. Your weapons. The galaxy wishes to understand how primitive kinetic force defeated Vorthak molecular technology. Feel free to watch, Admiral Sunwoo said, but stay out of our way. The Nexari ships moved to a safe distance and deployed what appeared to be sophisticated sensor arrays. They were clearly planning to study human combat techniques. Sir, reported Tactical Officer Jaehyun Cho, long-range sensors are detecting the Vorthak Third Fleet. 200 ships approaching in battle formation. Time to intercept? 6 hours at current speed. Admiral Sunwoo looked around the bridge. His officers were calm and professional. This would be humanity's largest space battle, but his crew showed no fear. All ships, prepare for combat. Deploy the new weapon systems. Across the human fleet, ships began to change. Hull panels slid aside to reveal weapons that had been hidden from alien observation. The simple, practical exteriors had been camouflage for humanity's true military capabilities. The battleship Soul's Pride revealed its primary weapon, a mass driver that ran the entire length of the ship. The projectiles it fired weren't simple, tungsten slugs. They were artificial neutronium cores wrapped in exotic matter containment fields. What are those? Vexthar asked, staring at the display in horror. Kinetic kill vehicles, Engineer Hyunwoo explained. Each one has the mass of a small moon compressed into a package the size of a baseball. The destroyer Gwangju unveiled its weapon systems, missile launchers that fired miniature black holes contained in magnetic bottles. Each missile was technically just a guidance system attached to a controlled singularity. Impossible, Vexthar whispered. You cannot weaponize black holes. Why not? Dr. Soyeon asked. They're just another tool. Point them at your target and let gravity do the work. The frigate Ulsan displayed its arsenal, projectile weapons that fired exotic matter bullets. Each round existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, making conventional armor useless. We tried to tell you at our first meeting, Captain Do-hyun said to the stunned Vorthak prisoner. You asked if we still used gunpowder. We do. We also use controlled fusion, antimatter containment, and dimensional manipulation. The difference is we use them all to make our bullets go faster. But why? Vexithar asked. Why focus on simple kinetic weapons when you clearly have access to advanced technology? Because they work, Admiral Sunwoo replied simply. Energy shields can be tuned to stop energy weapons. Molecular disruptors can be countered with the right field harmonics. Exotic physics can be neutralized by other exotic physics. But a sufficiently massive object moving at sufficient speed will punch through anything. The Nexari ships moved closer, their sensor arrays working frantically to understand what they were seeing. Admiral Han, Zafara's mental voice was filled with something that might have been fear. These are not primitive weapons. No, Admiral Sunwoo agreed. They're not, but they're still basically just bullets. Very sophisticated bullets moving very fast, but bullets nonetheless. The Vorthak fleet is entering weapons range, reported Jaehyun from Tactical. All ships, you are free to engage targets of opportunity. Show them what human engineering can accomplish. The first salvo from the human fleet was devastating. Neutronium. Penetrators punched through Vorthak crystal armor like it wasn't there. Black hole missiles created gravitational distortions that tore enemy ships apart from the inside. Exotic matter bullets simply ignored conventional physics and struck their targets regardless of shields or armor. War Marshal Krelvex himself led the Vorthak charge in his super dreadnought Crystalline Vengeance. The massive ship was 5 kilometers long and protected by the strongest armor the Vorthak Empire could produce. It lasted exactly 37 seconds against the Soul's Pride's main gun. The neutronium penetrator struck the super dreadnought's bow and kept going. The projectile was so massive and moving so fast that it didn't just pierce the armor. It carried away significant portions of the ship's structure as it passed through. Target destroyed, reported Jaehyun calmly. Across the battle, the story was the same. Vorthak ships that had seemed invincible were being destroyed by weapons they couldn't understand or counter. The aliens had developed defenses against energy weapons and exotic physics. They had no defense against bullets that obeyed laws of physics so fundamental that they couldn't be circumvented. Admiral, called Yunho from communications. The remaining Vorthak ships are requesting permission to surrender. Granted. Have them power down weapons and prepare to be boarded. The battle was over in less than an hour. Of the 200 Vorthak ships, only 43 survived to surrender. The rest had been destroyed by humanity's primitive weapons. Vexthar stared at the tactical display in shock. How long have you had these weapons? The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in its 1,000-year history. Representatives from 300 species had gathered at Harmony Prime, all talking at once about the same impossible thing. Humans had destroyed the Vorthak Empire's Third Fleet using kinetic weapons. Ambassador Taehoon Lim walked into the massive council chamber with quiet confidence. Behind him came General Nariseo, humanity's youngest fleet commander, and Dr. Kangmin Oh, the man who had designed many of Earth's most devastating weapons. The noise in the chamber died as the humans entered. Hundreds of alien eyes followed, their movement to the small human section, the same seats where they had been mocked 3 months ago. Council leader Morthek raised several of his tree-like arms. The emergency session will come to order. We are here to discuss the recent developments involving humanity and the Vorthak Empire. Ambassador Thextar rose from his seat. The Vorthak representative looked different now. His crystal armor was darker, and stress fractures showed along the edges. The destruction of their fleet had shaken the entire empire. The humans used weapons of mass destruction, Thextar declared. Neutronium projectiles, weaponized black holes. This violates all treaties regarding prohibited weapons. Really? Ambassador Taehoon asked mildly. Which treaty specifically prohibits kinetic projectiles? The Treaty of Stellar Accord forbids weapons that can destroy entire planets. Our weapons can't destroy planets, General Nari said. They're just very effective against ships. Neutronium has the density of a collapsed star. Thextar's voice rose to a grinding roar. Yes, Dr. Kangmin agreed. That's why it makes such good bullets. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Species that had never paid attention to humans were now studying them with new interest. The small primitive mammals from the galactic rim had somehow become a military power overnight. Order, Mortek called. Ambassador Lim, please explain these weapons to the council. Taehoon stood slowly. He looked around the chamber at the assembled aliens. Some showed fear. Others displayed curiosity. A few seemed angry that their assumptions about humanity had been wrong. 3 months ago, in this very chamber, you asked if we still use gunpowder, he began. The answer was yes. You laughed. You assumed that because we use simple principles, our weapons must be simple. He gestured, and a hologram appeared above the council table. It showed a cutaway view of a human railgun projectile. This is what you called a metal pellet. The core is artificial neutronium, created by compressing matter beyond what nature normally allows. The shell is exotic matter that exists in multiple dimensions. The guidance system uses quantum entanglement for targeting. Representative Velkar of the Insectoid Collective clicked her mandibles nervously. But it is still just a projectile. Yes, Taehoon agreed. A very sophisticated projectile moving at significant fractions of light speed. How fast? Asked Ambassador Krextor of the Silicon-based Federation. Our latest models achieve about 15% of light speed, General Nari replied casually. The chamber fell silent. Most alien weapons, no matter how advanced, had maximum velocities measured in thousands of kilometers per second. The humans were talking about tens of thousands of kilometers per second. Impossible, whispered Zifara of the Nexari Collective. Matter cannot be accelerated to such speeds without exotic physics. We do use exotic physics, Dr. Kangmin explained. We use them to build better railguns. But why? Demanded Thextar. Why focus on kinetic weapons when you clearly have advanced technology? Taehoon smiled. Because they work. Let me demonstrate. He activated another hologram. This one showed the recent battle between human and Vorthak forces. The aliens watched in stunned silence as their superior molecular disruptors failed to stop simple kinetic projectiles. Your molecular disruptors work by breaking atomic bonds, Tae-hoon explained as the hologram played. Very impressive against most targets. But our projectiles don't care about molecular bonds. They carry so much kinetic energy that they go through your armor whether the atoms are bonded or not. The hologram showed a neutronium penetrator striking a Vorthak super dreadnought. The massive alien ship simply came apart as the projectile passed through it. The kinetic energy has to go somewhere, Dr. Kangman added. Usually into heating up whatever we hit until it becomes plasma. This is barbaric, declared Representative Morgeth of the Energy Being Consortium. You destroy with brute force instead of elegant physics. Elegant physics can be countered, General Nari replied. Brute force properly applied cannot. What do you mean? Asked Velkar. Your energy shields can be tuned to stop specific frequencies, Tae-hoon explained. Your dimensional barriers can be bypassed with the right phase variance. Your molecular disruptors can be neutralized with appropriate field harmonics. But momentum is momentum. It follows laws of physics that can't be changed or circumvented. The chamber was quiet as the implications sank in. Every species present had spent thousands of years developing increasingly complex weapons and defenses. The humans had gone in the opposite direction, perfecting simple weapons until they became unstoppable. Show them the rest, General Nari suggested. Tae-hoon nodded and activated a new display. You wanted to see our weapons. These are our standard, ship-mounted systems. The hologram showed the human fleet's true arsenal, railguns that fired neutronium cores, missile systems that launched guided black holes, particle beams that accelerated exotic matter to relativistic speeds. Each system follows the same principle, Dr. Kangman explained. Take something with mass, make it very dense, send it very fast at your target. The specific technology we use to achieve this varies, but the result is always the same. What about your fighters? Asked Ambassador Quextal of the Crystalline Hegemony. Kinetic interceptors, General Nari replied. They're essentially manned missiles. The pilot guides a tungsten penetrator to the target, then ejects before impact. Manned missiles? Thextar sounded horrified. Our pilots are very good, General, Nari said with pride. And very brave. But this is suicide. Not if you eject in time. We've only lost 3 pilots in the last year. The aliens exchanged glances. The humans spoke of weapons that could destroy capital ships as casually as others might discuss the weather. Their primitive military doctrine was proving more effective than anything the galaxy had seen. What about larger weapons? Asked Morthek. Planetary bombardment systems? Kinetic bombardment, Tae-hoon replied. We drop tungsten rods from orbit. Each rod is about the size of a telephone pole and weighs several tons. When it hits the surface at orbital velocity, it releases energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. No exotic matter, no quantum manipulation. Gravity does all the work, Dr. Kangman said. We just provide the targeting. Representative Sithkar of the Hive Mind Collective spoke for the first time. You have turned the fundamental forces of the universe into weapons. Yes, Tae-hoon agreed. Gravity, momentum, kinetic energy. They're all weapons if you know how to use them. But surely you have limits, Velkar insisted. What is your most powerful weapon? The 3 humans exchanged glances. General Nari spoke carefully. Our most powerful weapon is classified, but I can tell you the principle. We accelerate a neutronium core to 25% of light speed using a gravitational slingshot around a black hole. The projectile has approximately the same kinetic energy as a supernova. The chamber fell completely silent. Several aliens made sounds that might have been whimpers. How do you aim such a weapon? Morthek asked weakly. Very carefully, General Nari replied. And you call this primitive? Thextar's voice was barely a whisper. It's still basically just a really big bullet, Tae-hoon said. We've just gotten very good at making bullets. Over the next several hours, the humans answered questions about their military doctrine. They explained how they had developed kinetic weapons to such perfection that conventional defenses were useless. They demonstrated their targeting systems, their manufacturing processes, their tactical doctrines. Through it all, the aliens grew more nervous. The humans they had dismissed as harmless were casually discussing weapons that could crack planets. Worse, their weapons couldn't be countered by any known technology. "What do you want?" Morthek finally asked. "The same thing we wanted 3 months ago," Tehun replied. "Trade agreements, cultural exchange, peaceful coexistence." "And if we refuse?" "Then you refuse. We're not interested in forcing anyone to be our friends." "But you could force us," Thextar pointed out. "We could," General Nari agreed. "But that would make us conquerors, not friends. We have enough planets. We don't need yours." The session continued through the night. By morning, 17 species had requested immediate trade agreements with humanity. 23 others asked for mutual defense treaties. The Vorthak Empire, through Ambassador Thextar, formally apologized for their invasion and offered reparations. As the humans prepared to leave Harmony Prime, they were approached by dozens of alien representatives. All wanted to understand how humanity had achieved such military success with such simple principles. "The secret," Dr. Kangman told a group of alien scientists, "is not to make things more complicated. The secret is to make simple things work perfectly." "But how did you know this approach would be effective?" asked a Nexari researcher. "We didn't," Tehun admitted. "We just kept improving what we had. Instead, the Chronari hegemony had watched humanity's victories with growing alarm. Unlike other species, they hadn't underestimated human capabilities after the Vorthak defeats. Instead, they had decided that humanity needed to be eliminated before it became too powerful. These humans are a threat to galactic stability," declared Overlord Crexmundus to his war council. The Chronari were an ancient species that had dominated their region of space for millennia using reality-warping technology. Their simple weapons should not work against advanced physics, yet they do. This makes them dangerous. The Chronari solution was typically direct. They would invade Earth itself with their most powerful fleet and demonstrate that reality manipulation trumped kinetic weapons. Their ships could bend space and time, making conventional targeting impossible. Fleet Admiral Junho Park stood in the command center of Luna Station, watching the long-range sensors with calm attention. Strategic Command Director Yuna Kim worked at her console, coordinating Earth's defense preparations. "Chronari fleet composition?" Admiral Junho asked. 400 ships, Director Yuna replied, including 50 reality warpers that can alter local space-time. Their largest vessel appears to be a dimensional fortress that exists in multiple universes simultaneously. "Time to Earth?" 6 hours at current speed. Admiral Junho nodded. The Chronari had made a critical mistake. They had chosen to attack humanity's home system, the one place where Earth's true military capabilities were concentrated. "Signal all ships. Activate Protocol 7. Release full arsenal authorization." Across the solar system, human ships began to change. For months, the galaxy had seen humanity's standard military equipment: railguns, kinetic missiles, and simple but effective weapons. What they hadn't seen was what Earth considered its real arsenal. The massive shipyards around Jupiter opened their construction bays. Ships that had been building in secret for decades emerged into space. These vessels looked nothing like the practical destroyers and frigates that had fought the Vorthak. They were larger, stranger, and carried weapons that followed human engineering philosophy to its logical extreme. Research Director Minho Jeon monitored the deployment from his laboratory on Mars. For 20 years, he had been developing weapons, systems that took humanity's kinetic weapon doctrine and pushed it beyond what anyone thought possible. "Sir," called his assistant, Dr. Sunmi Lee, "the Einstein's hammer is reporting ready status." "Excellent. What about the Newton's fist?" "Weapons charged and targeting solutions locked." The Einstein's hammer was humanity's newest dreadnought. It looked deceptively simple from the outside, a long, angular hull with minimal external features. Inside, it contained humanity's most devastating weapon, a kinetic accelerator that used controlled black holes as gravitational slingshots. Captain Bora Shin commanded the flagship Incheon, rising from her position on the bridge. The ship was smaller than some human battleships, but it carried a weapon that Dr. Minho had spent 15 years perfecting. "Ma'am," called Weapons Officer Taijin Yun, "the stellar core is stable and ready for deployment. What's our target package?" "The Kronari Dimensional Fortress. Intelligence suggests it's their command ship." Captain Bora nodded. The weapon her ship carried was officially classified as a kinetic bombardment system. In reality, it was something far more terrible. A projectile made from neutron star material, guided by quantum entanglement and accelerated by a harnessed stellar core. "Kronari fleet entering the outer system," reported Sensor Officer Jaewon Kang. The enemy ships were impressive. The smallest Kronari vessel was larger than Earth's biggest battleship. Their hulls seemed to shift and blur as reality-warping fields bent space around them. The dimensional fortress existed as a shadow across multiple universes, making it nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. "Incoming transmission from the Kronari fleet," called Communications Officer Hyeju. Park put it through. Overlord Crex Mundus appeared on the main screen. The Kronari leader was a being of pure energy contained within a geometric crystal matrix. When he spoke, reality itself seemed to vibrate. "Humans of Earth," his voice echoed strangely. "We have come to end your threat to galactic order. Your kinetic weapons cannot touch our reality-warped vessels. Surrender and we will grant your species quick extinction." "This is Fleet Admiral Junho Park of Earth Defense Command," came the reply from Luna Station. "You are in violation of human space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Crex Mundus made a sound like breaking dimensional barriers. "Consequences? Your metal projectiles cannot target what exists partially outside reality. We have studied your battles. We know your limitations." "Then you've studied the wrong battles," Admiral Junho replied calmly. The Kronari attack began with reality distortions that should have made human targeting systems useless. Space itself bent around their ships, creating false images and impossible geometries. Their weapons fired controlled tears in space-time that could unmake matter at the quantum level. But humanity's response was unlike anything the Kronari had faced before. The Einstein's hammer fired first. Its weapon wasn't a traditional railgun. Instead, it accelerated a neutronium core through a series of controlled black holes, each one adding gravitational acceleration until the projectile reached 28% of light speed. The Kronari Dimensional Fortress was protected by reality-warping fields that made it exist in 17 different universes simultaneously. The neutronium projectile existed in all of them. "Direct hit on the Dimensional Fortress," reported Weapons Officer Taejin. On the tactical display, they watched the massive Kronari command ship simply vanish. The projectile had carried so much kinetic energy that it had overwhelmed the fortress's dimensional anchors, causing it to collapse into a single universe where the laws of physics applied normally. "Target destroyed," confirmed Sensor Officer Jaewon. The Newton's fist engaged next. This ship carried what Dr. Minho called exotic matter projectiles, bullets that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. The Kronari ships could hide in alternate realities, but they couldn't hide from projectiles that existed in all possible realities at once. "Impossible," came Crex Mundus's voice over the communication channel. "Our ships exist outside normal space-time. Your weapons cannot—" His words were cut off as the Incheon Rising fired its primary weapon. The stellar core projectile was essentially a miniature star, compressed into a bullet and guided by quantum entanglement. When it struck a Kronari reality warper, the explosion was visible from Earth's surface. "How?" Crex Mundus demanded from his backup command ship. "How can kinetic weapons affect reality manipulation?" "Because," came Dr. Minho's voice as he joined the communication channel, "reality manipulation is still subject to physics. You can bend space, but you can't violate conservation of energy. Our projectiles carry enough kinetic energy to overwhelm any reality distortion." The battle continued for 3 hours. The Kronari threw everything they had at the human fleet. Time loops that should have prevented human weapons from ever firing, space distortions that should have made targeting impossible, reality tears that should have unmade human ships at the quantum level. None of it worked. Human weapons operated on principles so fundamental that they transcended the exotic physics the Kronari relied on. A neutronium core, moving at significant fractions of light speed, didn't care about time loops or dimensional barriers. It simply carried too much energy to be stopped by anything short of total annihilation. "Admiral," called Director Yuna from Strategic Command, "the Chronari fleet is requesting permission to surrender." "Granted. Have them power down all reality warping systems and prepare for boarding." Of the 400 Chronari ships that had attacked Earth, fewer than 50 survived to surrender. The rest had been destroyed by weapons that operated on physics so basic that no amount of reality manipulation could counter them. The aftermath of the battle was broadcast throughout the galaxy. Species that had considered humanity's previous victories to be flukes now understood the truth. Humans hadn't been using their real weapons. "How long have you had these capabilities?" asked a captured Chronari sub-commander during interrogation. "About 30 years for the basic systems," replied Dr. Minho. "We've been improving them ever since. But these are weapons of mass destruction. They could crack planets." "They could," agreed Captain Bora. "But we're not interested in cracking planets. We just want people to leave us alone." The interrogation revealed the scope of humanity's true arsenal: stellar core projectiles that could destroy entire fleets, exotic matter bullets that ignored conventional physics, kinetic bombardment systems that harnessed the rotational energy of pulsars. "Why didn't you use these weapons against the Vorthak?" the Chronari asked. "Because we didn't need to," Dr. Minho replied. "The Vorthak were defeated by our standard equipment. Why use a stellar destroyer when a railgun will do?" As news of Earth's victory spread, the galaxy began to understand humanity's true military philosophy. They didn't build the biggest weapons possible. They built weapons that were exactly as powerful as they needed to be for each situation. The fact that they had weapons capable of cracking planets wasn't meant as a threat. It was simply the logical conclusion of their engine.